You can listen to The Professional Left wherever you get your podcasts, on Netroots Radio, or at our website, proleftpod.com, where you can also contribute to this podcast. There's a PayPal button at our website, or you can mail us a letter and or contribution at P.O. Box 9133, Springfield, Illinois, 62791.
This is the podcast for April 24th, 2020. It's not safe for work.
Coming to you live from the Cornfield Resistance, where we know that Lysol is for trash cans and beer is for tummies. It's The Professional Left with Driftglass and Bluegal.
Hey, Driftglass.
Hey, Bluegal. I'm sorry to interrupt your vacation for this, podcast thing we do.
There's no vacation from podcasting, Driftglass.
No.
You know that. We podcasted on our wedding day.
Yeah. Yes, we did. We podcast through.
It was a Friday, and
That's
you got to have a podcast. That's what has to happen.
We got a thing. We have I think a contract, sort of an understanding, a moral obligation almost to our listeners.
Yeah.
We're extremely kind and supportive and write us all kinds of good letters and occasionally an ass-kicking one. And we really feel that this is, especially now, especially when we're all hunkered down.
Yep.
There's nothing going on in the news except just fucking nightmare sauce all day long, to let you know that there are people who have a microphone and who hopefully can give you some context and comfort and let you into our lives a little bit and just talk like people talk. And
I feel so bad for people right now. I really do.
I do.
Particularly,
I really do.
1 out of 5 New Yorkers has the coronavirus.
I know.
And would test positive if there were any tests.
Right. And there are no
tests. And to have added to the burden of that, the claim by the Senate Majority Leader that somehow it's a bailout because of the politics of your state. That you are being bailed out and that bankruptcy is a better alternative.
If you'll recall, that was Donald Trump's original plan for the national debt.
Right.
He said, here, no one understands debt like me. I run up debt. I break casinos. I've had bankruptcies. Here's what we'll do. We'll declare bankruptcy as a country.
Yeah, pennies China, on the dollar.
We'll get pennies. And it's great. And every single person who has any understanding above the level of a ferret had to say, that's not how governments work. And that is absolutely how the reserve currency of planet Earth doesn't work that way. And he just doesn't understand how anything works. And so crazy shit comes out of his mouth because there's no one left around him to tell him otherwise. He's fired them all. And
this is, I think, the thing. I know we've talked about the challenge to capitalism that's going on right now of there is no work. There is no way to generate economic activity in a pandemic. There's just no safe way to do that.
No.
And I can foresee a decision being made at the United Nations that we just do declare a universal jubilee. No one has any ability to repay this because this is just over. And yet, if you do that, then you have to forgive Puerto Rico their debt from before the pandemic. And there are people that just don't want to do that because they're making money off of one of the poorest spots on Earth.
Yeah, this is a species-wide debt that we owe to ourselves, and we're going to just wipe it away, forgive it, and start over again.
Yeah, but if you do that, then you've got, the banking system has to reset in a really bad way for the right people. The people who were first in line to get the payday loans, the PPP loans. The banks treated them with extra special care and got them to the front of the line. There was something else I was going to say about that. Oh, I know. France, Poland, and Portugal. Did you hear about this morning?
It sounds like did they walk into a bar? Because I've heard that one.
They walked into a bar and they said, if your company is registered in a tax haven, you don't get a bailout from our national government. You don't get to come in and dip into our treasury when you have been avoiding taxation for your whole company's creation. You don't get to do that. And, no one ever could have predicted that there would be some sort of advantage to actually paying your taxes as a corporation, rather than registering in Zug, Switzerland, or St. John's, or the Cayman Islands, where the banks wrote the law. In the United States, the banks wrote the law for St. John's. That no, this is where we get to stash our wealth.
Yeah, this is where we park our wealth to keep it out of the greedy hands of the American tax system, so that we can pay for roads and bridges and airlines and health care.
That's why if I was President Elizabeth Warren, I would use the U.S. military to invade those places and take their computers back with me. And then you could apply to the U.S. federal government for your money back minus 30%. Right. That's it. We'd solve the national debt right away. Driftglass, you've written a lot of wonderful notes about our podcast today. I did read them. I want you to know.
Oh my God, you read the notes? Oh,
I read them. I usually don't do that. I usually want it to be a surprise. And Driftglass said to me, "No, you have to read the notes today." Yeah. So, Lysenkosism.
Yes, this is something I've been writing literally for years about the Republican Party. It's Trofim Lysenko was Stalin's geneticist. And he told Stalin the shit that Stalin wanted to believe. It was politically, ideologically necessary that you could inherit acquired traits. That was something the party wanted to believe. That's something Stalin wanted to believe.
Right. And so if I dye my hair blonde, then my children will be blonde, right? Yeah.
If you take enough rats and you cut their tails off and breed them, eventually you'll have tailless rats, which is not how genetics works. And but that was not what the dear leader wanted to hear. The dear leader wanted to hear that it is how genetics works. So he, as far as I understand the literature, killed all the scientists who said otherwise and promoted Trofim Lysenko. The science, this mythology is called Lamarckism, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but promoted this guy to be his geneticist and gave him funding and gave him state support, blah, 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 blah. And of course, it set Soviet genetic science back 50 years because that isn't how fucking science works. That is exactly where we are now. And it is quite astonishing to see people that it's gotten so bad. Republican constant lying, and Donald Trump daily freak show, telling people to try Lysol in your cooter because that might work, or maybe that episode of Star Trek. Remember that episode of Star Trek, Operation Annihilate, where Spock goes blind? Just do that. Just do that. Just go near the sun enough to kill the thing, and you'll be fine. And right, Dr. Burks? And you just see this woman, just the last shred of her soul, leave her body. And then the next day, when the Lysol Corporation had to publish a press release saying, please don't inject our stuff into your body. It'll kill you. Please don't gargle with bleach. It's bad for you. The next day, President Cornered Rat says, I never said that. I was it was a sarcastic question. I was giving a sarcastic answer to a reporter's, shitty question. Except there was no question. There was no reporter. It was just Donald fucking Trump freestyling. But he has now surrounded himself with a bunch of Lysenkos who will tell him whatever he wants to believe is true. Sure,
Their paycheck depends on nothing else but making him content.
Or I will throw you to the mob. I will feed you to the mob of lunatics that the Republican Party is. Or you can stand behind me and tell me that I'm the greatest living person on earth ever in history. Those are your two choices.
The tires on the bus no longer touch the road for all the bodies he has thrown under it. Absolutely not. Yeah.
And the New York Times was Johnny on the spot today because the New York Times, as I'm sure you all know by now, is written by an algorithm that just says Republicans did something horrible and unforgivable, but probably some other people disagree. So we're not going to tell you which is which. We're just going to say, who knows? So originally, the New York Times responded to Donald Trump telling people, hey, try Lysol, try disinfectant. You can inject it into your body, or some bright light that can shine right through you. It's whatever. Or, strap yourself to a tanning bed for a month. That might work. Which, of course, followed the hydrochloroquine disaster, which was pimping a chemical cure that doesn't work, that leads to death of people, that they used on, I believe, veterans to experiment to see how that works. And the problem was some died and there were heart problems and it didn't cure anything. Right. So it's one.
Well, it's used in severe cases of lupus.
Yeah, and malaria.
And right, there are reasons to use it. If you're going to die anyway, this will help.
And under very carefully controlled circumstances.
Right.
But
and now people with lupus can't get the drug.
But this asshole just spinning one snake oil remedy that he pulls out of his ass after another, and the entire Republican Party falling in line behind him. And then it turns out to have been incredibly dangerous and completely wrong. And the medical professionals are saying, please, for God's sakes, don't do what this lunatic says. And then the Republican Party, they're responding today by passing around copies of Breitbart and the Washington Times, the Mooney Times, as you know it, which says basically you didn't see what you saw, you didn't hear what you heard.
He didn't say what he said.
No, just suicidal level of self-delusion and doublethink, which, as I've said before, will come as a complete surprise to anyone who hasn't paid any attention to the Republican Party for the last 30 years, and to a bunch of never-Trumpers who want you to believe that history began in 2006. So the New York Times
history now began in 2016. Yeah. Yes.
Well, this is their habit. Every 2 years they restart history to get out of all this crazy shit they said. But the New York Times said first, some experts believe this advice is dangerous because New York Times. Yeah. And they were dragged so hard on social media. The New York Times later deleted the tweet and admitted there are actually no other experts on the other side of this question. No one in their right mind thinks this is right. But it is so ingrained. Well, it was
because the word "some experts" trended on Twitter.
And and someone ran into the office of Arthur Ochschulberg II, or third, the guy who now runs the place, and said, we have to do something because this is the limit to both-siderism.
Yep.
This is the absolute limit. We can't just keep fucking lying to people that there are two sides to every story and there's valid opinions on all sides. There's no valid opinion. There's no expert on earth that says gargling with Clorox or injecting Lysol will help you. And that's the New York Times.
Someone replied to that announcement. Someone tweeted, we finally limits of both-siderism. And someone replied with a quote from the New York Times from the John Yoo era.
Yeah.
Of the only legal expert anyone could find arguing the point for Bush was John Yoo.
Yeah.
And the New York Times reported legal experts disagree on this issue.
John Yoo got a lifetime tenure at Pepperdine, I think.
Yep. And the torture memo was written. It's okay to torture people.
Well, and he got a job, I believe, at the Washington Post. He's an opinion columnist because they're a separate country. They don't the lives of people out here in the world don't affect them at all. I don't know if you want to dive deep into the USA Today article, the spread the plague protesters, but I
do want to talk about Wisconsin quite a bit today.
Oh, please.
So particularly about how the not practicing social distancing, white-haired white people who are dedicated state party Republicans in Wisconsin. Let's be clear.
Yes.
This is the base in Republican base in Wisconsin, and they are marching and protesting and want to be exempted from any shutdown orders because rural counties don't have this yet.
Yeah. They're plague rats is what they are.
So they came into Madison to breathe the air and stand real close together. And then I guess they're going to go back out to their farms. And like you said, they're going to spread the virus.
Right.
And no masks, no covers, no social distancing, etc. And not a lot of people were there. It wasn't even a Tea Party rally in terms of numbers.
No.
But everyone looked exactly the same in terms of age cohort, and race and ethnic background. They're all cut right out of the same cloth. The organizer of this particular rally begged people not to bring Confederate flags and AK-47s.
Please.
And people still did.
Please. No.
Well, because of the optics. And he said, it's because of the optics. I understand that the Confederate flag is basically about states' rights, he said.
Right.
When I hear that, and as one of my colleagues at Crooks and Liars said, when I hear that, I hear, the Confederate flag is totally about black people get to be slaves.
Right. That's all it's about.
Get to be slaves,
right.
Because I'm white and I decided that it's okay. Yeah.
It's the traitor flag of a group of losers that these people just won't fucking give up on because that's who they are.
Because white nationalism is the thing. That's what they want. So I want you to talk about Charlie Sykes and the Bulwark.
Yeah. Okay.
If you would, go into the bunker of the Bulwark and tell us all about what they're saying.
Well, Charlie Sykes is a long-time, 20-year veteran of Wisconsin conservative talk radio.
Right. Specifically Wisconsin, folks.
Specifically Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And I have made it, as I made it my mission once upon a time to keep track of the daily abuses and molestations of journalism committed by David Brooks. And that's been going on for 15 years now. I have decided to make it my mission to keep track of the Never Trump movement. And the Never Trump movement has a headquarters in the Bulwark podcast, the Bulwark website. This is all the people from the Weekly Standard went over to a place after the Weekly Standard was destroyed, took the mailing list, took all the funders, took all the talent, went over and started their own podcast and their own network. And they have been working really hard to pretend that Republican history began in 2016. And they have a huge budget relative to you and me or really anybody else.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you on that.
Okay.
I don't think that they're saying that Republican history started in 2016. No. I think they are asking us to imagine that a whole new political movement called Trumpism was created in 2016, which has nothing to do with the traditional Republican Party of conservative patriots like Charlie Sykes.
Well, and listening to him today, as I in one ear as I'm doing laundry and disinfecting the house and doing what I do, listening to today's Bulwark podcast, so you don't have to, pining for the good old reasonable, idea-driven Republican politics of Paul Ryan. The good old days of libertarian crackpot supply side bullshit Paul Ryan.
But I'm a numbers guy.
I'm a numbers guy. Yeah, the numbers you are giving us are fucking made up. That's why the numbers work. That's why your party loves them. But Charlie Sykes and the Bulwark podcast is falling into a regular rhythm. Part of it is it's not my fault. It's not my fault. I hear on social media every day, you built this, Charlie. Well, not from me, because of course he blocked me years ago for saying exactly this. But people say this, but that's not true. And he goes on at great length and he invites people on to agree with him. that no, we never knew. This never happened. We had no idea. Tom Nichols, who also blocks me because I also pointed this out to him, went on there recently, like this week. They do a podcast a day, so it's tough to keep up. Saying that for 30 years, conservatives never asked each other, what kind of person are you? What kind of conservatism do you believe in? What kind of citizen are you? We just never knew. We had peace and prosperity. Everything was going great. So we never bothered to ask each other, what do you actually believe in? And then comes Trump. And oh my God, we suddenly find out there's a whole bunch of people that we thought we knew that we never knew. Subtext. And of course, this is just being nodded and agreed to by Charlie Sykes, who runs the podcast. Subtext is, Tom Nichols never listened to Rush Limbaugh, never watched Fox News, never stuck his fucking head out of the window and listened to anybody on radio, never heard of Regnery Press, never read Breitbart, never read the Weekly Standard, and is completely unfamiliar with a guy named Newt Gingrich, who took over the party 25 years ago. So that's their alibi, is we never knew. We never knew. And part of the protocols they enforce at the Bulwark, which seem pretty rigid, are you're never to use the R word.
Right.
Never, ever. They have a speech code. My God, I thought they hated those things, but they have a speech code. And the word Republican is all but forbidden. It's Trumpers or Trump supporters or Trumpism or Trumpist, but never Republicans. So when Tom Nichols claims to be astonished that Donald Trump has an electoral floor of somewhere between 38 and 40%, he is safely shielded from any liberal asshole like me from pointing out that, wait a minute, 38 to 40% is basically the entire Republican Party. You missed the perversion and deviancy and and bastardization and monsterization of the entire Republican Party. Your party. The only thing you ever did in your fucking life in this context is claim to be an expert on conservatism and the Republican Party. And you are admitting that you never had any. So my question is, why is anyone listening to these people? Well, here's the answer. They are self-proclaimed. Their job is going to be to set history right. Because
and bring the country together.
So
that's going to be their mantra. Yeah.
And so Tom Nichols, if this sounds weirdly familiar, it should, because we were talking about Katie Abram back in 2009. Katie Abram at the beginning of the Tea Party movement. Katie Abram, who's suddenly a beloved child of the Tea Party movement. Katie Abram, who didn't want her country to become Soviet Russia because of Obamacare, and who swore on her life that she'd never talked about politics or thought about politics, was unaware of it. She somehow slept through 9/11 and slept through 2 wars and slept through the $2 trillion bill the Republican Party racked up. And she slept through tax cuts for the wealthy. And she slept through another bunch of tax cuts. And then she slept through Katrina. And then she slept through everything, Terry Schiavo, everything, only to wake up in full flower of righteous patriotism the minute the black guy took the oath of office. That is what she would have you believe. Now, Tom Nichols is worse because he is swearing that he didn't know about any of that, or had any opinion about that, or really was unaware of any of that, plus all the shit the Republicans pulled during the Obama administration. He was apparently not aware of birtherism or death panels or anything. For 30 years, who knew this was going on? Who knew this was happening? Well, if that's your answer, Tom, then shut the fuck up and go away. Because I knew, my wife knew, pretty much every liberal knew, and the screaming crackpot lefties out here were trying to warn you all this time. This is your party, man. This is what every time you dig in and tell us that we're alarmist and we're nuts, this was what we were trying to warn you. If we used it in more and more explicit language, we shouted louder and louder, and you told us to sit down and shut up. And here's the problem. They are focused on, literally, their great fear is that all of the stuff Trump does is being memory holed, that no one will remember this stuff once the smoke clears. So their mission is to create the history of our time so that everyone knows that Donald Trump's a liar and a monster and Lysol and this and this and this, all of which is fine. The problem is their history begins in 2016.
Right.
They don't want to talk about, and they will not invite anyone near one of their microphones to talk about anything that happened prior to 2016. They've created a bubble exactly like the bubble they lived in before Donald Trump was there.
Well, because Donald Trump looms so large on the noise machine that the conservative movement has right now, that it'll be easy, they think, to lance him from their story once he's gone. And we're seeing that in this AstroTurf movement. The USA Today article, I want you to talk about this because this is so important. This is so critical to the Burn the Lifeboats movement.
Yeah.
Laying at the feet of the Republican Party, Donald Trump and the Republican voter who put him in office.
Yes, they did build this. And there's a long, and I've gotten, 200 emails today, I guess, about, oh, dude, this USA Today article, isn't this exactly what you said would happen? I'm like, yep, this is exactly what we said was going to happen. Yeah. They're out there. They're a bunch of just grassroots organizers. And USA Today really just is shit. I mean, they devoted, full page article, 2-page article on comparing this to the upstart Tea Party. It has a strong Tea Party vibe. It's very similar to the Tea Party. And it's just a bunch of...
Without recognizing the millionaire funding and the $1 million that Glenn Beck got to promote the Tea Party and the Fox News personalities who attended Tea Party rallies around the country and gave free airtime to promoting those rallies.
Well, and the Freedom Caucus guy, I believe that's right, the head of the Freedom Caucus guy, Freedom Works, the head of the Freedom Works guy being quoted in the article saying, there's nobody in charge of this, it's all just fucking grassroots.
And he's from Freedom Works. He's from the Dick Army group Freedom Works that funded the Tea Party.
So, but implicit, no, not implicit, but woven into this article are all of how a memory of how the Tea Party just sprang into existence. It was a spontaneous, organic thing that just happened overnight. And again, this is the danger of letting monsters, whether they are Donald Trump's people or whether they're Charlie Sykes' people, write history for you. Because 10 years later, what's remembered? The Tea Party was a spontaneous grassroots movement that just came into being because people were just gall darn fed up. And it wasn't partisan. No, these were all independents. These were all constitutional conservative independents. And by God, in that middle of that article, don't you find someone who says, this isn't about parties. I'm not a Republican. I'm a constitutional conservative.
I'm an independent.
Fuck you, lying sack of shit. You are a Republican down to your fucking shoe tops, and you damn well know it. But now they're building the lifeboats. There are two sets of lifeboats. One is for the people who are out there trying to infect everybody else, the plague bearers.
Well, they're going to say they never liked the tweeting,
We never liked the tweeting.
They were behind Donald Trump in principle.
This is a grassroots
because they
movement.
want to make America great again. But Donald Trump turned out to be disappointing to us.
And so there's that lifeboat that they're building for themselves with no guidance or help from any national organization, God forbid. And there's the other lifeboat, which is going to run right next to theirs, which is the Never Trump lifeboat, which is, it's bad. We admit it's bad. God, it's bad. But he's not a Republican. He's not a conservative. We had nothing to do with this. This wasn't us at all. And
and watch carefully for the shaming of liberals and Democrats.
Right.
That you're going to be the attempt is going to be made to shame us because we're divisive and not wanting to bring the country
Why are you
back
so hateful?
Together again.
Why are you so hateful?
And I would refer anyone saying that to you to the Laura Ingraham show.
Yeah. Yes.
And just force that person to watch half an hour of Laura Ingraham and tell us who is actually dividing the country.
Well, I do believe the country should be brought together on the bones of the Republican Party. On the graveyard, on the ash heap of history where the Republican Party is dead and buried forever. And everyone who supported it, everyone who brought us to this place, everyone who built this thing, whether they're going with Donald Trump all the way off the cliff or swearing they had no idea that things were so bad, even that they were drawing a paycheck to make it that bad, all they have to do is walk around with an R tattooed to their forehead the rest of their lives so that we know who you are. We can see you from a distance. And we know that when you gather in small groups, you're out to destroy this country because, I've said before, never underestimate how deeply conservatives hate this country.
Well, and never underestimate how much they will erase all memory of what they did and how they voted.
Well, and thank you for that. There's one more thing I wanted to add to the bulwark thing, the Tom Nichols. Tom Nichols, his brain is so broken that on this podcast with Charlie Sykes, he still swears that, quote, everything is precedent. That while Trumpers are enjoying, I'm sort of freestyling, but this is roughly what he said. I'm going to write up a long post about this that won't be published at the Bulwark. I'll tell you that. That while
poor
Trump,
Driftglass, he never gets published at the Bulwark.
I never get published at the Bulwark. 10 years later, people say, "Oh shit, you saw this coming, didn't you?" And yeah, I did. I really kind of did. Well, why weren't you put in the paper? Have you read the New York Times? Have you read the Washington Post? They don't want to hear from me.
Both sides. They want to hear about both sides.
They want to plagiarize from me 10 years later, but they don't want to put me in on a byline. But he is so broken that he believes his salvation is precedent. Because while the Trumpers are currently enjoying owning the libs, they won't have a leg to stand on if a President Biden says that he has complete authority to do X, Y, or Z. Really, how will Mike Lee and Ted Cruz cope with a President Biden who just says, well, Trump did it, so I get to do it? And to that I say, you really haven't paid any fucking attention to your own party at all, have you?
Yeah,
Every
really.
precedent your party established for Bush and Reagan, they threw right out the window when Bill Clinton was president. Suddenly it was investigate, anything a president does, no matter how minor, if there's a hint of scandal, must be, we're going to go after your Christmas card list, we're going to go after your land deals, everything must be scrutinized, everything. That was what you believed in your heart. That was what you swore on the lives of your children was important. The minute Bill Clinton left office, you threw all that away. And Bill Clinton who? We don't know who that is. What happened?
Well, and the perfect example of that, Driftglass, I actually retweeted Sean Hannity yesterday because, there are 10 Democratic senators who want to investigate how Donald Trump, Trump has handled the COVID-19 crisis. thus it begins.
Yes.
It's a tragedy. This is just terrible.
Mm-hmm.
The witch hunt, again, a witch hunt, another witch hunt from the Democratic Senate, as if somehow there's a Democratic Senate.
Yeah.
Witch hunt, hysteria.
Uh-huh.
That's Sean Hannity, who has also made it into the news this week because there's a study from the University of Chicago that shows that people that watch Hannity are more likely to die from COVID. We're sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Relative to Tucker Carlson, who took the COVID-19 cases more seriously than Hannity did.
Right.
And Hannity dismissed it as a Democratic hoax. Mm-hmm. And Tucker Carlson looked at it, I guess, from an epidemiological standpoint. Well, Hannity viewers, people, I guess there are people that don't watch both of them because
Tucker Carlson's too liberal, I guess.
Too liberal. Yeah.
But this idea of precedent meaning anything to a Republican it goes back to Bush Reagan, which they jettisoned for Clinton, and then all the things they said they believed for Clinton, they jettisoned the minute George Bush became president. Suddenly, oversight, schmoversight. We don't care. Tax cuts, deficits. Who gives a shit about that? Light us into the wrong war. You want to hold hearings? What are you, a monster?
Right.
Why don't you support the troops? Why don't you support the president? What's wrong with you, you traitors, you monsters, you backstabbing surrender monkeys? 8 years of that, and then the black guy puts his hand on the Bible. Suddenly, oh my God, where do these deficits come from? We need to get rid of these deficits right away. Oh my God, his executive authority. Oh my God, he probably isn't even legitimate. He probably wasn't even born here. Again, everything that people like Tom Nichols said they believed when George Bush was president, they jettisoned immediately because they don't have any fucking principles. So precedent doesn't mean anything for them. So 8 years of birtherism and obstruction and death panels and tan suits and constant hysteria from the right and constant threats of war because Barack Obama is going to come and take your guns away. And then, of course, they nominate and elect the king of the birthers. And everything they said they believed under Obama goes right out the window. Precedent doesn't mean shit to Republicans, Tom, at all. They're just going to say, it never happened. We were never there. I never told you to drink bleach. And they're going to move on because that's what your party has been doing for your entire fucking adult life. And the fact that you didn't notice that doesn't reflect well on you, Tom. It makes you out to be either a complete idiot or a soulless a huckster, a con man.
Well, and Donald Trump talking about disinfectant and bleach got everybody to stop talking about him recommending hydrochloroquine.
That's not a curve you want to be on because eventually it's going to be just shoot your dick off. Just take a gun and shoot your dick off. That might work, and then it gets to be again another Driftglass parody, which was you know what liberals would hate? Putting that gun in your mouth. They'd really hate that.
We don't want to go there.
No. I mean, I did that as a stick figure post.
You did that as a joke
8 years ago.
8 years ago.
And Charlie Pierce talking about, if Trump told them to throw themselves into a live volcano, they'd do it. I'm like, you know when I wrote that 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I've spent a lot of this week just going to my old posts, pulling the shit I said was going to happen, clipping it and putting it on Twitter, which is basically a fire hose of everybody. But it is a little exhausting to, instead of focusing on new stuff I want to write, pulling stuff from my own archives going, told you so. Yep, this is going to happen. And watching as the Republican base does exactly what you knew they were going to do all along. And the Republican elites do exactly what we told you they were going to do all along.
And that's the thing. I think the Republican elites are somewhat shocked by how quickly social media is calling them out for having cashed all those checks with the Tea Party and not being a grassroots movement. Yeah. And I hope that continues. I hope people will watch for words that are used instead of Republican. I had to say to a woman who's on our side, who's a total great liberal, and she lives in Oregon, and she said, I'm just so glad my governor's not an idiot. And I said, you misspelled Republican.
Yeah. Yep, I'm doing the same thing.
You've got to just keep reminding people, don't make this generic. This is about, with the possible exception of Mike DeWine in Ohio.
Yes.
I had a conversation with my sister this week who lives in Ohio. And she said, I didn't know anything about him. And she's not, I say she's not a political person. I say that about people But my sister doesn't follow politics daily like I do. She's a concerned citizen, but she doesn't follow politics daily. She said, I really didn't know anything about him except he was a Republican and I didn't vote for him.
Right.
But Mike DeWine has had hearings, briefings every day. It's based on science and what the doctors say. And I do believe that he's trying to save lives. And you have to give him credit. I said to her, Donald Trump is underwater by 26 points in Ohio, and therefore Mike DeWine can do what he wants.
Yeah, exactly. He's safe.
That's why.
Yep.
And so otherwise, be very cautious about using words like idiot or even conservative. Make sure that you recognize this is a party, and this party has a problem. It has a lot of problems. Problem of white nationalism, racism, bigotry, and just a denial of science, a denial of experts, and a so-called president, who was totally incapable of making this not about him, making it about the American people. I mean, he hasn't expressed sympathy for the dead. Well,
he's the victim here, Bluegal. You understand?
Exactly.
The worst victim of all is Donald Trump, because people don't appreciate how much he's done for this country. Just ask any Republican on social media. He's the real victim. They're the real victims.
Before we get to the story of Mr. Electrico, which we promised our listeners last week, our local congressperson has voted against the Select Coronavirus Oversight Committee in the House.
He did?
He's got to go. And we got each one of us got a big, huge mailing from Rodney Davis.
We did. We feel so privileged and loved that the guy who wants to take our health care away. And we've gotten 2 phone calls from the Betsy Dirksen Lonergan campaign asking what we can do for you. Is there anything we can do? Anything you need?
Are you okay?
Yeah. And she's not in office yet.
She's not in office.
Rodney Davis is in office, and Rodney Davis is very busy voting against congressional oversight for Donald Trump. And trying to take my health care away from my family.
Yep.
So Rodney Davis can suck it, because he's not going to be in office at the end of it. He's got to go. I'd like to add on that sort of local note and Republican note, I would like to add that there is I have seen and sensed in my spidey sense kind of way a lot of tension, especially with some local businesses that we don't want this to be political, but please stop trying to destroy the post office.
Because I need it for my business. I need it for my business. I needed it before this, and I need it after this. I need it for my business.
Or I'm the child of a post office official, and the post office is wonderful, and I need it for my business. And I saw it on NPR, which is neither left nor right. It's right down the middle. And it is this is especially true of living in Trump country, is local businesses are directly affected by the policies of the Republicans' friends and neighbors who voted to put this monster in office. One of the things that the monsters in D.C. that your friends and neighbors elected are trying to do is destroy the post office. Yeah. And these local businesses can't use the R word.
Yeah.
They can't say, the problem is the fucking Republicans. The problem is that guy on the Chamber of Commerce who's a bundler for the fucking Republican Party.
Exactly.
He's the guilty one here. And a bundler
for Rodney Davis, and he should be calling up his friend Rodney Davis, to whom he has given a big, healthy check, and say, don't destroy the post office. I need it for my business.
Right. And they can't say that. So they have to say, I don't want this to be political.
Right.
It's not. This is neither. This is about right and wrong, not left or right.
This is what independent constitutional conservatives who never like the tweeting want to say, so that they are not accountable for the results of their voting and their donations.
And this is where Both-Siderism journalism, from the New York Times to the State Journal
to NPR
in Springfield, has gotten us, where it is so terrifying, so forbidden to mention that this is all the fault of one political party. Because it's so important to appear unbiased, that when you simply report what is happening, you sound like a liberal.
Right. Because Donald Trump did tell you to put disinfectant in your body.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they're so terrified of appearing anywhere but the dead center. And the center is now, by the way, truly dead. that they have to force themselves into these weird locutions as if the Republican Party didn't exist. There's just some alien force out there that's trying to kill the post office that has nothing to do with the people you voted for and put into office. And your neighbors did. And that somehow it would be rude to point out to your neighbors, who, in my experience, never have a hard time sharing their political opinions with me.
Right.
That they are the problem.
Well, both sides are equally bad.
Right, it's just so sad. It is so sad. Why can't you be nice?
Hey, Driftglass, I also want you to talk about that State House member, because our governor is doing a great job.
Oh, God.
He has shut down the state for another 30 days to the end of May, and he has partially opened up something. Everyone in grocery stores is going to have to wear a mask as of May 1st.
Yep.
He's also opened up some things where some other stores will be able to do curbside drop-off and curbside purchases that were not able to do it, including yarn stores. That's how I found out about it.
Yeah. The yarn mafia got to him. He's in pocket of big yarn, Bluegal. Pocket of big yarn.
But I want you to talk about Representative Darren Bailey.
Oh, yeah. Representative Darren Bailey did a little video of himself in front of the government building where he works or something like that. Just... He's a patriot, Bluegal. He's District 109, and he filed a lawsuit against evil Governor J.B. Pritzker. Enough is enough. I filed this lawsuit on behalf of myself and my constituents who want to go out and die. No, that's not what he said. That's not what he said. Who are ready to go back to work and resume a normal life. This district is located in the Wabash Valley and includes all of Edwards, Jasper, Richland, Wabash, Wayne, and White counties, a part of Effingham and Lawrence. So I'm not sure we can ever go back to Effingham again, Darrell.
There's really an Effingham, by the way.
There really is. Because they won't say it. They won't swear.
They won't say it. Yeah. Effingham. So we love Effingham. They have a wonderful restaurant there that we like to go to.
Sometimes we do a little one night, when we scrape together enough of our...
What's the name of that restaurant again?
The Firefly, I believe.
The Firefly Grill. Yeah. It's a farm-to-table restaurant in Effingham.
We also had a protest here. Which is kind of generous calling it a protest. There were about 50 people. I looked at the pictures. I'd say 30. But it's
and it was very much like the Wisconsin protest.
Yes,
in terms of the age and whiteness of the people attending.
Very old, very white. A lot of guys who were like, and it's just this whole thing where you can just see your Republican credentials and your Trump, Pence 2020 ass hanging out of your pants. Swearing that you're a fucking independent and you don't want this to be, we don't want to be pawns in someone else's movement. We don't want to, this is all just spontaneous. Yeah, you know what?
And yet it was some guy in Florida that designed the headers for all of these Facebook pages.
Well, and it might be spontaneous for you because you're a dumbass.
Yeah, and you read it on Facebook and decided to go downtown. Right.
Well, this sounds good. I want to be Patreon too. But the actual idea of putting a bunch of people as plague rats into the public square to protest communists like me, I suppose, is so fucking Republican down to its bones that, and again, I don't expect any better from these people.
No, really their entire politics has always been based on grievance.
Yeah.
So, and we're the real victims here. And that's nonsense. You're taking, most of them are taking a state pension in Springfield.
Right. I don't expect any, I've never been disappointed by Republicans acting like Republicans. I've never been surprised. It's never shocked me. But it continues to just drive me nuts that these people get coverage in the news as something legitimate rather than
a bunch of brand new movement. Yes, right. Right.
That's what bothers me.
And I want to thank Governor Cuomo of New York for pointing that out. Yeah. He pointed out a couple of really important things this week.
Yes, he did.
To Mitch McConnell about how New York pays more than they get from the federal government into the tax stream, and Kentucky does not. So we are actually bailing you out every year, Mitch McConnell.
And the context for that is Mitch McConnell wants states to go bankrupt.
Right. We talked about that at the beginning of this podcast. Yeah. He does. So that was his suggestion. Yeah. And then he also pointed out to a intrepid reporter who kept asking him, well, isn't the cure worse than the disease? He said, no, the disease is death.
Yeah.
Is losing economically worse than death? No, it's death. This disease is death. And it's not only death for you, it's death for me. It's death for other people. you will be killing other people. If you are a asymptomatic carrier of this virus, you will be responsible for death. That is the worst thing that can happen is death.
I have a little yellow flag that says, don't tread on me. What about that? Well, okay, good for you.
Death.
You know
and
what?
So he pointed this out, and he said, the media wants to make this about the protesters said this and the governor said that. That all the governor is saying is death. This is causing death. And there is nothing worse than death.
I have seen a variation of that Gadsden flag that says, don't spread on me. So
don't spread on me. There you go.
Well,
and we got a letter I want to talk about this letter from Ed, and then I want you to talk about Mr. Electrico.
Oh, sure.
Okay?
Sure.
We're running out of time. Ed in Ohio, my old stomping ground. I was born in Ohio, everybody, in Ravenna, raised in Kent. And Ed wrote us from Ohio and said, hey there, after years, I'm writing you for the first time. First, turning to the internet during the Bush reign of terror for a voice of reason and common sense among all the chaos. I quickly discovered you. It's been some time since the first listening to your honest, not safe for work take on the Republicans' lying, cheating fuckery. I am a more informed person because of it.
Well, thank you.
I received my check for the Trump virus damages, and so please accept a percentage of it for your excellent work. Wish it could be more. Hope it helps. Now I must admit, looking at my checkbook balance makes me feel dirty. I got to go take a shower. Hey, we appreciate that, Ed. And want to remind everybody, please, if you do write us a small check at any time, make it out to the Professional Left. That's what our bank account says. And we snuck your check in, Ed. It was made out to Driftglass and Bluegal, and we just kind of.
I made sad puppy eyes through the window.
Yeah.
Oh, you know
the
me.
Drive-through window.
We go to church together. You can trust me. Okay,
you can trust me. All right, we'll run it through. But we appreciate that, Ed, very much. And you can write to us. We love hearing from you, and anytime that we can help you atone for the dirtiness you feel in your checking account, we're happy to do it.
Indulgences built all the cathedrals in Europe, so we're happy, happy to take your check and absolve you of all your sins.
Absolve you, yes. We got a check from the Internal Revenue Service today.
We did. Pretty exciting.
I opened it up thinking, oh boy, this is going to be a big chunk of change, and it was $1.23.
Yeah.
I had overpaid our taxes by $1.23, and they decided to send it back to us. So we haven't received anything on the Trump virus check front yet. So I don't know when that's going to happen.
I don't expect to. I think we're on a list somewhere, and I don't think we're.
I don't know. You might be on a blackball list of Donald Trump. Yeah.
I want to give a bit of good news because there's a whole bunch of bad news. I want to shout out to workers in a Pennsylvania manufacturing plant who clocked out after a month on the job. They lived in the factory. Goodness. More than 40 employees. This is from CNN. More than 40 employees volunteered to spend 28 days at the Bascom America plant in Marcus Hook near Philadelphia to make polypropylene, a raw material needed to make N95 masks, medical gowns, and other protective gear. They went home on Sunday. And to them, I say,
oh my goodness. Yay.
There's so many amazing people doing amazing things. I'm close to tears. I really am. When I think of all we spent a lot of time talking about the people who are breaking this country and want to keep on breaking it. And
the mayor of Las Vegas, Driftglass.
Oh, God.
We didn't talk about her.
No, we didn't. You want to go ahead?
Well, apparently, she wants to reopen those casinos. And then Anderson Cooper asked, are you going to go to the casinos? And what did she say?
She said, I got a family. Are you kidding? Yeah. And
you know what? A Republican answer.
Except she's not. She's a Republican answer. If you look at the Chiron, she's an independent, Bluegal.
I'm an independent.
She is an independent. Right. So, as promised last week, I'm reporting on the origins of Mr. Electrico, which was a real person. As you all know, my Twitter handle is Mr. Electrico, and that's borrowed from Mr. Ray Bradbury. And this article from the Paris Review with Ray Bradbury explaining the origins of his character was sent to me about 1,000 times in the last 2 weeks. So I thought I'd share it with you. And this is from the Paris Review article, which asked Ray Bradbury about the origins of the character named Mr. Electrico. And now I'm quoting the article. Yes, but he was a real man. That was his real name. Circuses and carnivals were always passing through Illinois during my childhood, and I was in love with their mystery. One autumn weekend in 1932, when I was 12 years old, the Dill Brothers combined shows came to town. One of the performers was Mr. Electrico. He sat in an electric chair, a stagehand pulled a switch, and he was charged with 50,000 volts of pure electricity. Lightning flashed in his eyes, and his hair stood on end. The next day, I had to go to a funeral of one of my favorite uncles. Driving back from the graveyard with my family, I looked down the hill towards the shoreline of Lake Michigan, and I saw the tents and the flags of the carnival, and I said to my father, "Stop the car." He said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "I have to get out." My father was furious with me. He expected me to stay with the family to mourn, but I got out of the car anyway, and I ran down the hill towards the carnival. It didn't occur to me at the time, but I was running away from death, wasn't I? I was running towards life. And there was Mr. Electrico sitting on the platform out in front of the carnival, and I didn't know what to say. I was scared of making a fool of myself. I had a magic trick in my pocket, one of those little ball and vase tricks, a little container that had a ball in it that you make disappear and reappear. And I got that out and asked, "Can you show me how to do this?" It was the right thing to do. I made a contact. He knew he was talking to a young magician. He took it, showed me how to do it, gave it back to me. Then he looked at my face and said, "Would you like to meet those people in that tent over there? Those strange people?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I would." So he led me over there and he hit the tent with his cane and said, "Clean up your language, clean up your language." He took me in, and the first person I met was the Illustrated Man. Isn't that wonderful? The Illustrated Man. He called himself the Tattooed Man, but I changed his name later for my book. I also met the strong man, the fat lady, the trapeze people, the dwarf, and the skeleton. They all became characters. Mr. Electrico was a beautiful man, see, because he knew that he had a little weird kid there who was 12 years old and wanted lots of things. We walked along the shore of Lake Michigan, and he treated me like a grown-up. I talked of my big philosophies, and he talked of his little ones. Then we went out and sat on the dunes near the lake, and all of a sudden he leaned over and said, "I'm glad you're back in my life." I said, "What do you mean?" "I don't know you." He said, "You were my best friend outside of Paris in 1918. You were wounded in the Ardennes, and you died in my arms. I'm glad you're back in the world. You have a different face, a different name, but the soul shining out of your face is the same as my friend. Welcome back." Now, why did he say that? Explain that to me. Maybe he had a dead son. Maybe he had no sons. Maybe he was lonely. Maybe he was an ironical jokester. Who knows? It could be that he saw the intensity with which I live. Every once in a while at a book signing, I see young boys and girls who are so full of fire that it shines out of their faces, and you pay more attention to that. Maybe that's what attracted him. When I left the carnival that day, I stood by the carousel and watched the horses running around and around to the music of Beautiful Ohio, and I cried, tears streaming down my cheeks. I knew something important had happened to me that day because Mr. Electrico, I felt, changed. He gave me importance, immortality, a mystical gift. My life was turned around completely. It made me cold all over to think about it, but I went home, and within days I started to write. I've never stopped. 77 years ago, and I've remembered it perfectly, I went back and saw him that night. He sat in the chair with his sword. They pulled the switch, and his hair stood up. He reached out with his sword and touched everyone in the front row, boys and girls, men and women, with the electricity that sizzled from the sword. And when he came to me, he touched me on the brow and on the nose and on the chin and said to me in a whisper, "Live forever." And I decided to. Oh, that story makes me want to cry.
It makes me want to cry too.
I love Ray Bradbury.
Yep.
So now you know part of the reason why I chose that name.
And, it reminds me so much, too, of a time when you took middle child to a bookstore.
Yes, I did. To the Doctor Who Festival.
Doctor Who Day at Barnes & Noble.
Yes.
And she wore her fez, and she wore her red bow tie.
She did.
And she wore her Doctor Who t-shirt.
She did.
And she was so terrified to walk in.
Because no one would be there.
Place with she didn't know anyone would be there, and no one would know how special Doctor Who was.
Right.
And that she was the only one, and she walked in and it was full of Whovians.
Right. And I didn't see her again.
You didn't. She found a friend. She found someone she knew from school was there. Mm-hmm. And so she had been very clingy to you walking in. Right?
The question was, what if there's nobody here? What if I'm all by myself? I said, well, then you and I will have a good time. You and I will have a Doctor Who party. And she walked in and the room was full of her people. And that was the last I saw of her for a couple of hours.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. And her nerdiness was given a expression that day.
She was validated that day.
Absolutely.
She found her tribe. She really did.
Oh, Driftglass.
Oh, Bluegal.
I love you.
I love you too. So I promised you a story.
What a lovely story.
And I had to steal it from someone else. I'm writing a story right now. And I don't know if you all know this, the motto of my blog from the day one is I don't try to predict the future. I try to prevent it. And that's a quote from Ray Bradbury. So my life was saved. It was turned around by a 4th or 5th grade teacher who gave me a copy of Dandelion Wine. Saw that I was having real trouble in school and in my life and said, I think you'd like this. And it turned me around. So hope we can do a little bit something along those lines for you guys every week, although most of what we talk about is politics.
Well, and so many of our listeners help us every week with either a donation or a letter or an email or a sunny yellow card. Everything we get, we appreciate. Each week we post to our Facebook page and website an Internet Kitty sent in by you, the listeners. This week's Internet Kitty is Rocco, and Rocco celebrated his 15th birthday this week. Happy birthday, Rocco. And of course, Rocco eats freshly poured cat food, our fake sponsor. Whether you serve pet store perfection or dollar store direct, your cat will sit on the kitchen floor and demand that the food they eat is only freshly poured. Freshly poured, freshly poured. Oh, my Lord, it's freshly poured. And you can visit Rocco at our Facebook page or website. And you can send your Internet Kitty or other pet to us. I'm sorry, but Bosco just walked in the room. He just walked in and sniffed my foot. You're singing the song, you know?
Yeah, you know the song. It's the deal. It's the deal we have, right? It's the arrangement.
I'm salivating over here. Come on. You can send your Internet Kitty or other pet to us at our email address, proleftpodcast@gmail.com, or you can also write to both of us. Feel free to write us. We do love hearing from you. Be aware that if you write us at any of our addresses, we reserve the right to read your email or U.S. Postal Service. Go Postal Unions. Letter on the air unless you say otherwise. # save the post office.
Save the post office. Save the post office.
Don't forget our gourmet coffee guideline. If you can afford to buy an espresso-based beverage for yourself, or as we've said, if you need a little indulgence for having cashed your Trump COVID check, feel free. We appreciate coffee donation or whatever you can send. This is not charity. This is our job. Approximately 1% of our listeners support this podcast with a contribution, and you can too. See our website, proleftpod.com, for details. Both our PayPal and postal address information is there at proleftpod.com. Shout out to our Patreon donors this week, and a thanks to Tammy. She makes sure that the Patreon people get early notification of our podcast, and it goes up on YouTube that way too. So we appreciate Tammy for doing that for both of us. Please share our show on social media, and thank you so much, guys, for doing that. We appreciate it. Hey, Driftglass, how are the Internet Kitties doing this week?
Well, Bluegal, the Internet Kitties mastered the basics of sheltering in place, eat, sleep, play, poop, years ago.
Let's think about living. Let's think about loving. Let's think about the hooping and the hopping and the bopping and the lovey-dovey. Let's forget about the wine and the crying, the shooting and the dying, and the fellow with a switchblade knife. Let's think about living. Let's think about life.
The Professional Left podcast is recorded under a Creative Commons license. Copyright 2019-2020, DGBG Productions.